Hi, I'm Asha Mohammed with Runta News, which is a newspaper that is commonly, for most ethnic people, English is not their first language. And I'm really excited meeting you today.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to meet you as well.
I have a couple of questions for you. Can you please tell us briefly what are the key issues when representing your district in the U.S. Congress?
Well, there's obviously a number, but I would say the two most important issues. My district is an incredibly diverse district. We speak 160 different languages in the 9th District, and it's diverse not just in terms of ethnicity. We also have, every religion you can name represented, and also it's diverse economically. I represent Southeast Seattle, I represent South King County, which have some people who are really struggling economically in this economy, and then Paul Allen is a constituent, because my district includes Mercer Island as well. So I think one of the keys is to reach out broadly to all communities to make sure that their voice is heard. And I know in particular in the East African community we've had a lot of success. I've had a Somali American and an Ethiopian American who work in my office, and so we aggressively reach out to those communities, and that's the key. My staff and I, we've got to be out there in the community. We have to be accessible to you to address the issues that are important. And then I think the other major issue facing our country in general is economic opportunity and equality of that opportunity. For decades now, the top 1% has been doing really well. But the American dream is that you don't have to be born wealthy to have opportunity. Work hard, play by the rules, you can have a good life. That's becoming tougher and tougher for a lot of the people that I represent. Part of it is just basic economics. We don't pay people for the work they do as much as we should. My father was a baggage handler at United Airlines. I grew up in SeaTac. So I grew up in a very blue-collar background, but I had opportunity. My father, because he was part of a union, as a baggage handler, he had a decent wage. Now, a lot of people doing that same job, they don't have any benefits. They're making less money now than my father did 30 years ago doing the same job. So the elementary school that I went to, Bow Lake Elementary, now has 85% free and reduced lunch. They didn't have that when I was going there. So we've got to focus on getting wages up for people who work. And then equality also is about combating bigotry and prejudice. We are still an incredibly sexist and racist society. So one of the biggest things my office does is we try to reach out to be as inclusive as possible. It's reflected in my staff. I hire a very diverse staff, but I'm only able to do that because of groups in the community. When I have a job opening, I will reach out to the Somali community and I'll say, who you got? We've got a position opening. I'll reach out to El Centro de la Raza, which works with the Latino community. I'll reach out to the local chapter of the NAACP in the Urban League and make sure that we are recruiting people from a diverse background, a background that reflects the people I represent. There's a ton of other issues, but representing the whole district and creating equality of economic opportunity for everybody, I think are the top two. I disagree very strongly with Donald Trump's immigration policy. To begin with, the way he demonizes immigrants has led to fear, terror in communities. People of color feel like they are not safe and protected in their community because they got a president going on a lot of times saying all immigrants are murderers and rapists and gang members, and that is absolutely untrue, and it has created a climate of fear across immigrant communities. And I'm talking about people, even people who were born here, are facing, are being hassled by ICE and by, other organizations just because of the way they look. The president has created a climate of fear and divisiveness in this country that we must fight back against. And further, immigration is good for the United States of America. All right? People coming to this country from all over the world wanting to build a better life for themselves and their family is what has renewed us generation after generation. To spread the message that immigration is hurting us is just dead wrong and ridiculous. So I'm concerned about his overall take. Then, separating families at the border, not giving people access to the asylum hearings that our law says they deserve is inhumane and terrible. Also, the excessive focus on detention and deportation of people in this country, and Some of it is focused on undocumented immigrants in our country, but a lot of it is focused on permanent legal residents. They dig up a crime from 20 years ago and rip somebody out of their community and lock them up in a detention facility. That's why I'm working with Congresswoman Jayapal to get a bill that would change the way we do immigration enforcement, to move away from detention, to move away from deportation, and really focus on safety and what's in the best interest of the country. Look, if there are people who are committing crimes, whether they're citizens or not, they ought to be arrested. But targeting the immigrant population the way the Trump administration has done is inhumane, wrong, and not in the best interest of this country. So we're working hard to try and change that. There are a whole bunch of other issues where immigration is concerned. And revoking the special status that we've given to certain countries. I think it's THS, I could be wrong. A special status, but basically, your country is in conflict, we're going to give you special. To pull that away from people who have been here for 20 years, again, it's inhumane, it's ripping families apart, it's ripping communities apart, and we're going to fight against it in every way we can.
Thank you. You have been in tune with foreign policy when it comes to representing such a diverse district. What are your views about the policy toward the Middle East, especially wars in Yemen, Syria, which some foreign power are making it worse?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's actually one of the strengths that I bring to this district because, as I mentioned, the diversity. Obviously, a lot of what my district cares about, it's education, it's jobs, it's healthcare, they're small business owners. But they also care about what's going on back home. The Somali community, again, remittances has been a major issue. In fact, the GAO is about to issue a report on what we can do to make remittances easier that I requested. So what's going on back home matters to a lot of my constituents. And you name a country, I've got people in this district who are from it. So I work on foreign policy issues in a wide range of places. Now, on the specific issues that you raise, Yemen and Syria are the two greatest humanitarian crises in the world. And Yemen is particularly troubling because I feel the U.S. is complicit in what the UAE and Saudi Arabia are doing there. And there is a complex civil war going on in Yemen. For us to choose sides in that, and for us to allow the blockade and to give any support for the bombings that have killed so many civilians, I think is not in the best national security interest of the U.S. and does not uphold the values that we want to. I'm working actually with Ro Khanna, who's a congressman from California, on a resolution to try and stop any support that we would be giving for the civil war in Yemen. And also we got language in the defense bill. I'm the ranking member on the Armed Services Committee to require a study of U.S. actions in Yemen to make sure that they are compliant with international and U.S. law. So I'm very focused on the Middle East, also on East Africa, on the Horn of Africa, and how we can help rebuild Somalia and deal with many of the issues that are in that part of the world. I have a great deal of experience. I've been to Africa multiple times, been to Kenya and Uganda and Democratic Republic of the Congo, and I've spent a lot of time in that part of the world. And it's because of my role in the Armed Services Committee. And I actually think what we're doing there is a pretty good model because by and large, we are there to help local countries deal with their national security threat. Contrasting that with what we did in Iraq and what we did in Afghanistan, where we sent over 100,000 U.S. troops into the country and said, we're going to fix it. We're going to force a solution down your throat. We are working with Ethiopia, we are working with Rwanda, we are working with Kenya and other countries in the region initially to try and contain the threat from, it was AQAP once upon a time, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and they're still there, but now ISIS is sort of ascendant, working against violent extremist groups, but also to rebuild a government in Somalia. And you're right, you can look at it now and go, but it's getting better. I mean, there was a time when the Somalian government literally controlled 4 square blocks of Mogadishu. That was it. Everything else was lawlessness. And now it's expanding. And you are creating more opportunity within Somalia. There's still a long way to go, but the lesson there is we didn't come in and impose a solution. We worked with the local populations who, they don't want these violent groups running their countries. They're the ones who suffer the most because of it. We worked with locals so that we could go bottom up in building a more stable and secure part of the world. Long way to go, but I think that model makes a great deal of sense. Healthcare should be a right of everybody in this country. Everybody in this country should have healthcare coverage, period. You look around the world, every industrialized nation has provided a better healthcare system than we do. They cover everybody and they spend half as much money. And that's the untold part of it. People say, oh my goodness, if we were to impose a universal healthcare system or a single payer healthcare system, how could we possibly afford it? We are already spending 18% of our GDP on healthcare. A country like France spends 8%, and they get better results. That's the second piece of it that's the myth. We have the greatest healthcare system in the world, right? Well, if you happen to be able to get access to certain parts of it, yes. But even someone like me, I've been through 3 hip surgeries in the last 4 years, and 3 years. And I did not get the best care because our system is based on quantity, not quality. Our healthcare providers are paid the same amount whether they treat you well or poorly. And I'm not saying that they're not committed and dedicated, but the incentives are all wrong. Our healthcare system needs to be radically reformed to include everybody. I also think the Affordable Care Act was a good first step, but the Republicans, first governors, now the president, are trying to undermine it. They're gutting it. They're taking health care away from the tens of millions of people that finally had access to health care. And I support the bipartisan effort Patty Murray has with Senator Corker to try to shore up the ACA and make sure that people maintain their health care coverage. That's the first step. But the second step is universal access, is a health care system that covers absolutely everybody in this country. Welcome is the number one message. You know, America is a constantly changing place and an evolving place. And immigrants are a huge positive aspect to that. And I want to get to know better new communities. Look, the key to my job, as I said up front, is knowing how to represent people who aren't exactly like you. You know, you're not going to find somebody who speaks 160 different languages, all right? But you need to find someone who is open to meeting people who are different than he or she is. And I'm open to that. And I think immigrants strengthen our community because of it. And this has been one of the challenges. I mentioned I grew up in SeaTac. Well, South King County has changed. When I grew up there, I graduated from Tyee High School, 95% white. You look at Tyee High School right now, it is as diverse as you can imagine. And our community, at first, when I was a kid and these changes were happening, I think was slow to respond to that. They were slow to be inclusive. That's why I've worked so hard to try to reach out to diverse communities, to communities of color, and make sure that they are included in leadership. Zach Udan is a city council person in Tukwila, Somali American. I've worked with him very closely. I think it's terrific he's on the city council. Deshaun Quinn, African American from that community. Jesse Johnson is a young man who just got elected to the Federal Way City Council, who once upon a time interned in my office. Up and down the region, Satwinder Kaur is an Indian American woman in Kent who I endorsed and have supported, who is now a Kent City Council person. You are beginning to see the diverse communities reflected in the leadership, but we still have a long way to go. But the big thing is, you know, change is part of life. And immigrants bring positive change to us. You know, back in the 19th century, everybody said that America would be destroyed by all the Irish and German immigrants. Now I see someone walking down the street, you wouldn't know if they're Irish or German. They're American. And the same is true of people from Latin America. The same is true of people from Africa. The same is true of people from Eastern Europe and Asia. They come here, they are Americans. And I think it is a great myth that, oh, they're not assimilating. they are assimilating. Now, not every single one of them is going to assimilate perfectly. It didn't happen in the 19th century either. All right, I forget, the Italians as well were part of that immigration wave, and there were, I went to college in New York. Little Italy is still there. Okay, there's still a community that's primarily Italian. Does that mean they didn't assimilate because they set up their own community? No, they assimilated, and now, frankly, we all get great Italian food, and we get the Italian culture. And the same is true with Africa and Latin America. America will always change, but that's its strength, not its weakness.
Emerging.